It's claimed Clare's honey trade is under threat by the prevalence of invasive species. It follows an appeal from the Irish Beekeepers Association for the government to implement a dedicated All-Ireland bee inspection service which would also protect pollinators from disease and parasites. Calls for a protection strategy have grown following the detection of multiple Asian Hornet nests in Cork last summer. A Clare Heritage and Biodiversity Forum member, Councillor Clare-Colleran Molloy, raised the issue at this week's meeting of Clare County Council, where she spoke to Clare FM's Daragh Dolan.
The bees don't just make honey, they actually pollinate so much so that a third of the world food production is thanks to the bees. So it's little did I know this, because I didn't grow up on a farm, didn't realise the importance that the bees have for our biodiversity and our food production and so on. But it was a call from my brother-in-law, Raymond Molloy, who has Molloy honey. You can get it in the stores all around Ennis and some villages around Ennis as well. And he called me one evening because he, along with many beekeepers, not only in Ireland but in Europe, in England, are very concerned about the potential decimation that could come to the bees if the Asian Hornet, which is one that has been detected in recent times almost haphazardly by the government. But there's another potential serious threat, and that's going to possibly come in from Asia unless it's monitored, and it's called the tropy mite. And that is such an invasive species that it will decimate the bees much faster than the Asian Hornet would. So what my motion is calling for today is for the responsible department at national level to implement an all-Ireland inspection process for bees and their protection and monitoring for these potential threats. Because my recollection is that last year, when the Asian Hornet was actually discovered in Cork and addressed by the local bee operatives there, that it was four guys or a couple of guys out in a beer garden, sunshine, and this chap observed that didn't look like a regular bee. And it's because he had done some science studies in college. He wasn't even a beekeeper, but it caused it to be that we knew that the Asian Hornet was in Ireland, in that area, and it was contained. So I suppose the reason I'm putting down the motion is because of the ask from somebody close to me, but also the realisation that we're very reliant on these bees for a lot that we take for granted.
And that's the thing, because on the surface level, I looked at this and calling on the government to implement their All-Ireland pollinator plan to tackle the growth of invasive species. You look at that and you think, do we have a problem with honey production? But as you mentioned, our bees pollinate the plants. That's where our livestock get a lot of their get a lot of their nutrition. So there's a lot more threat here. What have you been hearing from other beekeepers and even maybe agricultural producers?
Well, it's interesting because the call that came from my brother-in-law Raymond Molloy came before I heard. I think it was David McCullough on RT1 speaking to. I think he was the chairman of the Irish Beekeepers Association, calling for the same thing. So then I realised there's real worry out there. And if beekeepers, I'd say most of the time they prefer to be with the bees rather than talking to politicians to try and address a real concern they have, then it must really be a concern. And Councillor Pat Burke came in on this motion very strongly. He's a farmer and his daughter is also a beekeeper up in East Clare, North East Clare, and he again wanted to really have it resonate very strongly with the government that this is needed, an all-Ireland inspection, bee inspection process that it needs to be adopted so that we can mitigate against the potential harmful effects of these foreign species. There's also in my role, Daragh, in Europe on the Committee of the Regions, I'm going to be bringing this to their attention because on that committee I sit in under the plenary in a committee that deals with the environment, climate control and biodiversity. So I'm going to be bringing this to their attention to see what is being done at European level to address the potential threat coming in from the Asian Hornet, but more importantly, we don't want the tropy mite in Europe or in Ireland.
And that was Clare-Colleran Molloy, the Ennis Fianna Fáil councillor, speaking with our own Daragh Dolan about this issue. And joining me on this now is friend of the show, Ken O'Malley, a beekeeping hobbyist, which is a phrase I've never got to use before. Ken, good morning to you.
Good morning, Alan. Thanks for having me in.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for being with us. Let's talk a bit first about your own setup. You have an apiary. How did you get into this game, and how sizable is your apiary?
Yeah, well, look, I guess starting off, I'm not an expert in beekeeping. I'm completely self-taught. There's a saying in beekeeping: if you ask 3 beekeepers a question, you get 5 different answers anyway. So I don't think anyone is an expert. But COVID 2020, I had a video popped up my reel. I saw a guy getting into beekeeping. I said, that sounds like a great idea. And literally I contacted someone below in Wexford, I think it was. Turns out a reputable beekeeper of the Irish AMNB. And I met him in Ennis. In the back of my wife's car, put 2 beehives in with about 100,000 bees in them.
100,000?
And all of a sudden it didn't seem like such a fun idea as we drove out the road hoping...
Were you sweating that they might crack out of the hive?
We were sweating. And look, I've 3/4 of an acre. It's not a massive site, but behind the shed, behind the house, I said I'd put the 2 hives in. Shall we see what happens? So I dropped them off, and I think maybe took a small bit of a stiff drink and went out then and decided to transfer them into a hive. No experience whatsoever, except for... Do you know the Haynes manuals that do car restoration and different cars? Haynes brought out a book called The Bee Book, and literally I had read that back to front, and myself and the 2 youngest kids got stuck into it, and we haven't looked back. It's been a fascinating journey up to the point 6 years at it now. And still not a member of a beekeeping society, although I should be, because the Banner Beekeeping Society is supposed to be an excellent society. But for me, I hang around with people all day in my business. I'd rather just hang around with bees in the weekend. So I'm happy enough to stick at it. And look, it's been successful. We get about 200 jars of honey a year of 5 hives, which is fantastic.
Okay, very good. And do they need much upkeep, the bees?
They do. It's unusual, and I didn't know this getting into it, but the bees, see... If you look at it, Alan, right, the AMB, the Apis mellifera bee is a European honeybee, and the Irish variant to that is an AMN is Apis mellifera mellifera. They've been around for about 2,000 years, since the end of the last ice age, and they adapt into Europe, they adapt into Ireland, and you know, if people weren't there, you'd say, sure, the bees have been around for 2,000 years, they survive fine, but unfortunately, they do now experience a significant threat through pesticides, through invasive species, like Clare said there, and also through swarming. If a bee colony swarms, that means 1 hive becomes 2. A virgin queen normally flies off, or the original queen would fly off with 20,000 bees. Only about 10% of those swarms survive, because they might go into a tree trunk, which they've scouted out over the previous few days, and then if it starts raining, that can get flooded, or maybe a predator would attack them and kill them. So
the safest environment for them is an apiary.
It is, Alan, and it's a symbiotic relationship. You know, the beekeepers obviously get the honey out of them, but we leave plenty of honey on the bee colonies during the winter for them to get through the winter and survive. But we also take care of them in terms of treating them for mites. You know, this new tropi mite is very worrisome, which I hear coming down, you know, the road to us potentially. And also, since 1990, there's a mite in Ireland that affects honeybees called the varroa mite, and you have to treat the bees against them, otherwise that mite will destroy the colony. So what is it? It's a tiny little mite about the size of a hair lice for humans. They go to a flower, they forage, they take some nectar out to pick up some pollen, and they might pick up a mite from a bee that was there previously. Okay. So very quickly, if you don't establish some sort of mite control, you can lose a colony over a few months. Yeah.
And in terms of treating your bees to ensure that they're free of this threat, how arduous is that? Or is it as simple as placing something into one of the hives and that can treat all of them? Because as you said, you're talking about upwards of 100,000 bees.
Yeah. So look, again, Alan, my own experience, I suppose, and self-learned and looking what people are doing. Some people would prefer a natural treatment remedy, but there is a treatment you can use, oxalic acid, which affects the mite and not the bee. And you literally see the mites dropping off the bees. If you put a white cardboard underneath the beehive and you treat the bees, you would see hundreds of them on the cardboard overnight. You know, so there's an oxalic treatment. There are people out there that would say, no, don't treat that, and that's fine, whatever they want to do. But I find great success in it, and I find that if I do have and experience some mite infestation, just basic treatments like that, following them, gets rid of it. And thankfully, you know, we have 6 hives went into the winter, and thankfully in the sun there the last couple of days I was peeping around the corner at them, and it looks like, thankfully, so far 6 hives have survived the winter, which is incredible.
Okay, long may that continue. Look, bees are you get 200 jars of honey out of them annually, but they're not just about the honey. They're vital to farming, food production and biodiversity and our continued existence on this planet.
Yeah, I think there's maybe a misappropriation of this, but Einstein seemingly said one time that if the bees go, we'll be gone in 4 years. You know, they are responsible for pollinating about 70% of the world crops. So, there's 100 different types of bees in Ireland at the moment. I'm only talking about honeybees at the moment, but there's 100 different types, and currently all of them are under threat, but 31% of them are actively under threat. They won't be here next year or the year after. And they're sometimes solitary bees that live in the ground or live in, rotten wood or whatever. So we do have to be very careful of, the farmers, the way they treat the land and stuff, and they're very conscious of what to use and not to use. And then looking at these threats, like the Asian Hornet just landed on our shores late last year, first confirmed sighting in Cork and then in Dublin. And our bees aren't evolved to face those threats. They're not a big threat in Asia to the Asian honeybees because over the last hundreds of years they've
adapted, I guess.
Yeah, they can kill it. They can actually swarm it. It's about 5-6 times the size of a honeybee. Okay, so they can swarm it in their 20, 30, 100 of them, and they'll actually cook it by shaking their wings. So they'll kill it and push it out of the hive. In Ireland, one Asian Hornet attack on a hive could wipe the whole hive out in 2 or 3 hours. So our bees are long behind, the curve in terms of protecting themselves from that. And that's just, a bee got into a container, they reckon, in France in 2004 and got into Europe, and now it's on our shores. And our government have been very much behind the ball in adapting to this. But even other threats like, the hybridisation of bees. If you look, I suppose all bees in Ireland at the moment are a mixture of different types of bees, right? But the AMMB is the National Irish Honeybee Society are actively trying to preserve that black Irish bee, that AMM strain.
And why is that important, Ken? Is that because crossbreeding can affect their, the productivity or make them less effective at producing honey or in doing the other things that bees do?
Brilliant question, and it's exactly all those things. So the big reason is, Alan, you can get aggressiveness in bees if they're hybridised. So if they mate with a different species of honeybee, they can become aggressive, and that's dangerous. A honeybee hive that attacks someone could kill someone, effectively. So that's one reason. The big reason is the AMM bees over the last 2,000 years have adapted in Ireland to be able to live through the winters, the long winters, to be able to fly and forage even when it's damp or wet or misty, and to be able to, just defend themselves against natural predators in the area. If they become hybridised, and they're just less effective in those traits, so they might not hibernate for as long during the winter, come out earlier and die because of the cold. So it's a very delicate balance.
Okay, so this motion calling on the government to act urgently, I guess, is one that all beekeeping hobbyists or beekeepers are fully supporting. I guess cross-border cooperation is important as well, an all-Ireland approach in terms of ensuring there's good bee health and biosecurity. Yeah,
absolutely, cross-border. We're on an island, and that could be advantageous. We're on an island, should be harder for invasive species to get in. But look, just looking at the Facebook groups, and as I said, I don't get involved in the politics of it. I'm self-taught and do my own thing. But, there was guys selling bees from Northern Ireland there last year, and there was a big commotion about it because these bees, didn't really know the origin of them, whether the queens were suitable to be mated in Ireland. And if you got, a regular breed into an area, within a few months or certainly a year, the entire population of those bees in that county or province could be affected. So, look, it's something that, as an outsider looking in and just enjoying this incredible hobby, it's good to see the government looking at it, but it really needs someone who, get professionals on board. There's guys like Keith Pearce in Ireland, who's just a genius with bees, right? Mary Coffey, she studies the DNA of bees. If there's disease in your hive, they'll test it for free. These are the people that need to be on a committee and actually making effective decisions quickly. The Asian Hornet arrived in Cork. Everyone knew it was coming, for years and years and years. It was on the Isle of Wight. It's all over England. And nothing was done about it. And from what I hear again on the outside, it's the beekeepers in Cork and areas that are gathering Asian traps. They're putting out these sensors and gathering these Asian hornets and finding where they are so they can effectively eliminate the nests as quick as possible. But it needs a push from government. It needs support from people like Councillor Molloy, who's doing a fantastic job on it. And I hope they listen before it's too late.
Okay, so the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan is important, and I guess continued support for it is important as well in addressing this threat.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the last thing for myself, look, I got into, there's a company in up in Toomgraney, Apis Bee Supplies. I bought hives off Chris up there. He makes his native Irish bee hives out of cedar. It's not cheap to get into. You know, it's going to cost you a few £100, but for anyone that's thinking of it and you have a bit of space in an area where the bees can go and fly and forage and to go up to 4 or 5 kilometres a day, you will never look back. Once you become a beekeeper, you'll be addicted to it. And I wish all the beekeepers the best out there and the government in tackling the issues that are coming down the line.
Just finally, Ken, for those of us who aren't beekeepers but can play a part, what can ordinary people do, be it in our gardens or communities, to help protect bees and pollinators?
You know, if you sit beside a beehive or 6 of them like we have, and there's hundreds of thousands of bees flying in and out, when they're foraging and they're working hard, which they do, they only last for 6 weeks, each bee during the summer. It takes 12 bees to make 1 spoon of honey, and they die over 6 weeks because they work so hard for the next generation. That's all bees are doing. They're trying to get the next generation to survive, to thrive and to become healthy. If you have bees, or neighbours have bees, support them. They don't sting you unless you actively go at them. What I'd recommend is...
The look in your face, I was wondering, did Ken learn by experience? Did you learn the hard way?
I did. I think every beekeeper gets stung, and thankfully I haven't had any reactions, and I know Jamie that helps me and Ryan. We do get stung every now and again, but you could literally go out in your T-shirt, and I've never done this and I wouldn't recommend it, when you're tending to the hives and doing your swarm control and swarm prevention, and they will land on you just for a rest and then fly off again. They're incredibly docile, especially the Irish AMN. So what would I recommend? Watch them, protect them, support them, support the government if they're trying to get through these things, because again, if the bees go, eventually we'll go,
Very well said. For a fella who took it up as a hobby, you certainly learned your stuff. You read that book cover to cover, Ken, that's for sure. Ken O'Malley, thank you very much. Really appreciate your thoughts and perspective on that on Tuesday's Morning Focus.